Good evening and welcome to this evening's live stream. I am joined by a special guest later on, but I will introduce him some way through the program. I'll start off with a few other stories. Now, those of you who've joined this evening excited, thinking this might have been the Christmas special, I'm sorry to disappoint you. The Christmas special will be next week. So there'll be all sorts of fun and games then. Do tune in. There'll be a bit of audience participation as usual. So 9 o'clock Tuesday next week will be the Christmas special live stream. But it seems like there's more going on every week these days. Lots of things going on, lots of smallish stories, but things well worth pointing out. And hopefully by the end of the hour, you'll feel I'm sure there's some of the things I've dug up here, you maybe hadn't heard of them. I think, well, that's quite interesting. What's going on? Let's get the comments on. Right. Good evening, Kirsty. Right. Let's start here, shall we? Now, I've talked quite a bit recently about depopulation, demographic decline being projected. Now, in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, this has been an issue for a long time because of people moving to urban areas. So they've had a depopulation issue. The suggestions been made here, this was in the newspaper, how about just paying people to live in the Highlands and Islands, or paying people to move there, just cold, hard cash. And I think, okay, maybe that's worth looking at. But I thought that strategy is a little bit out of date because it's assuming there's a surplus of population in the Central Belt and in other cities, towns and cities in Scotland. But the way we're heading, the problem isn't just we've got lots of people in some parts of Scotland. We need to get them to move to other parts as well, spread them around a little bit. The problem we're heading towards is there's just not enough people anywhere. So offering cash to redistribute the population, I'm not saying it's a terrible idea, but the problem is a lot deeper than that. That's the problem we're looking at. We'll have a bit more of that later in the live stream. Another quick story, a few quick fire stories to get started with. Anti-abortion campaigner held for 6 hours after complaints despite police admission of no offence. This was a gentleman in Cambridge, and he was with a CBR. Now, CBR is a pro-life group. They've got a team in Glasgow, and they've got a team just started in Inverness. They've been active in Scotland, and their modus operandi, is to take huge displays into public places, high streets, etc., that show fetuses. In Scotland, they're not allowed to show actual abortion images, but in England, they also show abortion images as well, and then engage people in conversation to help people to appreciate the reality of abortion. So they're doing one of the displays with abortion images in Cambridge recently, and they got arrested. So the police would have come along and said, right, you need to take those down. They said no, because they're pretty sure they weren't breaking the law. But they were arrested, held for 6 hours, and then, as so often happens with these cases, same with street preachers, held them for ages, and then released when the police finally get their legal team in gear to say, actually, we don't think this is breaking the law. And so CBR will be carrying on with this sort of activity. Now, as I say, in Scotland, the police have also told CBR, if you do this, we will arrest you. You will be breaking the law. We'll arrest you. You'll be charged. I mean, are they bluffing? Very possibly. I think the police is quite capable of engaging in that sort of behavior. We've had that as well, where they try and scare you off by suggesting something's illegal, when actually they know it probably isn't, or it isn't illegal. So this sort of story might be coming to Scotland before too long. But this report was in the Telegraph. And I wanted to point out one very interesting thing about it. They managed to cover the whole story without mentioning CBR. Now, what's that all about? CBR is the organization that was organizing this display. It mentions some other people with CBR who've been arrested in the past wrongfully, but it doesn't mention CBR. To me, that sounds deliberate. If you're an organization, if you get a story in the Telegraph and a bit of controversy around you, people are going to look you up. People will be interested. That's a bit of a boost for you. But it seemed to me like the Telegraph deliberately didn't want to name CBR as the organization involved here. But watch this space. Let's see what happens in Scotland on this front as time goes on. Right, another quick story. Nigel Farage reported to the police over election fraud. Now, you probably know there are legal limits to the amount you're allowed to spend in an election campaign, nationally and within a constituency. Now, at not last year's general election, the one before then, the Conservatives were accused of overspending because they were so desperate to beat Nigel Farage that they broke the rules. I think they were actually found guilty of doing that as well. But now someone's accusing Reform or Nigel Farage of overspending in the election. I think the limit's about £20,000 in that constituency. Now, what do I think about that? Well, to be honest, the rules are so complicated and it's so difficult to know what you're supposed to count as election expense and what you're not, especially once you've got paid staff. So if you've got paid staff who are working full-time through the whole year and they do a bit of work on the election campaign, is that them being paid, or are they volunteers doing that? I mean, it gets really, really complicated trying to keep track of what actually is an election expense. So if Nigel Farage is in Clacton campaigning and he goes into Wetherspoons for a beer to chat with some people, right, does that beer count as an election expense? Probably does. So basically, probably anyone who's up around the spending limit, and Reform would have been more or less on the spending limit, anyone who's about on the spending limit, if someone looked into every last detail of their expenses, they'll probably find some sort of irregularity, and it would probably be quite innocent. But in this case, someone's made it their business to try and find irregularities with Reform's conduct of their accounting in this election campaign. Right. Do I believe Reform would have been absolutely squeaky clean in this? Well, very possibly not. But on the other hand, if someone looked really hard, even if they were trying to be squeaky clean, would there still probably be some irregularities to find? Probably. So I think these stories often amount to sort of a bit of a nothing, really. But we'll see. I mean, the police will investigate. If there are clear-cut examples of Reform doing things that obviously they should have realized that was blatantly obviously an election expense and should have been included, then action will be taken. But what action do you take? Do you overturn the results? I mean, that would be the fair action in an extreme case, wouldn't it? I mean, if one side's cheated during the election campaign, I guess the result would be null and void. But I would be extremely surprised if that happens. But let's watch this space. Let's see what happens. With the family party, we've broken the rules on this once or twice. In our very early days, well, the first time I started, I just forgot to do one of the, well, I didn't realize you had to report your expenses to 2 different places. And I thought you just did it to one. And so technically, I broke the law with it. And we try our best to follow the rules, but it's very, very complicated to do it all properly. Now, this is something I don't remember talking about before. This is from the Electoral Reform Society, whose normal mission is to be promoting proportional representation in all elections. And we're absolutely for that, because that is just fair. But look at what they're promoting here. They're saying political parties shouldn't be personal vehicles for the views of the super rich. And they recommend a donation cap for donations to political parties. Reform had a donation of £9 million this week, and that the Conservatives had one of 10 million not too long ago. Labour and the Lib Dems have had multi-million pounds donations as well. And I think it's a very valid question to say, should wealthy people be able to exert so much power over the electoral system? And I think the answer is no. No, they shouldn't be able to do that. You know, and nor should the BBC as well, because they do their very best to exert influence over the democratic process as well, as much as they're able to get away with. But should donations be capped? Yeah, I think there should be. I mean, how much a year should someone be able to give? You know, £1,000, £2,000? I think a figure like that would be quite reasonable. So an extremely wealthy person, well, you can't sort of buy influence in the political system. Yes, that's quite interesting. Now, another thing, let's say you did that. So you can't give millions of pounds. Let's say you wanted to support Reform. You can't give them millions of pounds. What can you do instead? Well, you can do what, is Paul Marshall his name, the GB News founder and investor did, is he set up a TV channel to promote his own political points of view. because GB News is the media wing of the Reform Party, or the Reform Party is the political wing of GB News. Put it which way around you like. So that's a very, very wealthy person spending money to have a massive influence on UK public opinion by starting his own TV news channel and funding it, basically. It's been a loss maker for a long period of time. Should a wealthy person be able to do that? Well, I think no, they shouldn't be able to do that. But on the other hand, you then think, okay, so what do we have? We have like unbiased channels, but they're biased as well. So that's not an easy one to crack, but I do have a problem with it. I say that wealthy people can exert some massive influence. Because I think Paul Marshall's creation of GB News has probably had more impact on political views in the UK than any donation to a political party. But if you're going to try and stop people, I mean, that would involve, say someone decided they're going to launch a website or launch a magazine or an online newspaper or something. Should they be prevented from doing it if they're trying to influence political opinion? Well, maybe let's say complex area, but certainly caps on donations to political parties would be perfectly reasonable. If you look at it, look at the number of members Reform are claiming and the big parties. It's a lot of members, so they're getting a lot of income from that. So Reform getting 9 million, is that a game changer for them in terms of their finances? Well, not really. The big parties would have plenty of money just from their members. And in some countries, of course, they have state funding of political parties. So at every election, they look at what percentage you get, and then you get that percentage of the pot of the political funding from there on in, which I think is a fantastic system. So the last Scottish election, if the total budget for all the parties would have been what? Would have been millions of pounds, then we would have had a very substantial sum coming the way of the Scottish Family Party, and that would be fair. That would give us the opportunity to build on our current position with fair resources. Well, we maybe consider that for a family party policy, a cap on political donations, but we shall see. Right, what's this one? MSP suspended by Labour facing Holyrood exit after he's unable to contest Edinburgh selection. Right, so this is Faisal Chowdhury. Here he is. Now, he was suspended for some sort of inappropriate behaviour. I think it did come out, some sort of sexual harassment charge. And so he's been suspended. The investigations are going on. And these investigations, this suspension, happened to straddle the period when you get selected to be a Labour Party candidate next year. So basically, he's been knocked out of the competition by being suspended due to this allegation. So in a few weeks' time, it might be that this allegation is found to be unfounded. But Faisal's out of a job as an MSP. Now, to be honest, I think Labour were already looking at dropping him because they've made it an all-female shortlist for the list or the constituency that he would be in. So he probably would have had it in any case. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because the culture now is any sort of allegation, someone gets suspended immediately. And then it can take weeks for the thing to be sorted out. And it really, the process is the punishment. So if someone's working as a member of the Scottish Parliament and they're accused of some sort of inappropriate behaviour like that, is it absolutely necessary to suspend them from the very first instance before anything's been found out about the case? I think it needs balancing out a little bit. I think on some occasions, a sensible decision would be, well, we don't need to suspend the person. Maybe we can add some extra conditions. Maybe maybe we can say they can't be working alone with various people or whatever. But suspension can amount to a punishment in itself. Right, Liam is enlightening us. Tories spent about twice the legal limit in Thanet South, suspected to be much higher in 2015, to keep Farage from winning the seat. Tory election agent for constituency was given 9 months in jail for it. Right, okay, that's a bit more specific. So they broke the rules big time. So from Nigel Farage's point of view, from the Conservatives' point of view, who got their man or woman elected, are they bothered if their election agent goes to jail for 9 months? Take one for the team. No, they mission accomplished. They got elected. Nigel Farage wasn't elected. Would it have made a difference, this money? Probably not, but it might have done. So it's a very serious matter. They're twice the legal limit. That's pretty Pretty dramatic, isn't it? Right, thanks for that, Liam. Another related story. This is Pam Duncan-Glancy, Labour Party MSP, quite widely respected, I would say, but she's quit the Labour front bench basically because she's friends with someone who was convicted in the past of being a a sex offender. Okay, so this person that Pam Duncan-Glancy already knew, it came out that they were a sex offender. I think it was child sex offender. But Pam Duncan-Glancy maintained a friendship with this person, not a close friendship as far as I can tell, but some sort of social relationship with this person. This came to light, and she's resigned from the Labour Party front bench. But I'm inclined to think, why? Why would you need to do that? If you, let's say, one of my friends, it came out that they'd committed a terrible crime in the past. What would I do with that friend? Well, if that friend was saying, well, I'm going to do it again, I didn't do anything wrong, then I might be inclined to say, well, okay, I think this is probably the end of the road here. But if the person is, repentant, full of remorse, wanting to, build the rest of their life or whatever, and someone who's been I've been a good friend too, we've known each other well, I don't think I'd say to the person, no, I'm cutting you off, right, bye-bye, push off, you're on your own from now on. I think that would be completely the wrong thing to do. I mean, do we not believe that in sort of redemption, forgiveness, the fact that a friendship or some sort of relationship can have bonds, even if the person's done something wrong, even if they've done something appalling? I think they should. So this seems a strange story. Now, the fact that she's resigned from the front bench, I mean, to be honest, that's not a particularly big deal. I mean, the election's coming up. I mean, who knew she was on the front bench in any case? Not many people outside the parliaments. It wasn't a particularly big deal. But again, it's within this culture that's building up here that's just an instant resignation offence. Whereas I'm left thinking, I'm not sure it's an offence at all. I mean, maybe she could explain a bit about it, but I'm not sure she did the wrong thing at all. Anyway, what do you think? Fire comments in if you want to. Another fascinating story here. Ex-soldier jailed for rape after tricking sex worker with fake $700 bank payment. This was in Australia. Victim claims she required over 500 hours of therapy after the ordeal. Right. So let's just clarify what happens here. So we've got a prostitute, and a bloke comes along as the customer, and he pays and has sex with the prostitute, but he paid with fake money. So he tricked her, basically. Now, the woman claims she required 500 hours of therapy after the ordeal, and I'm sure the hourly rate of that is built into the claim in court. Right. Does anyone believe that she needed 500 hours of therapy after this ordeal? Well, absolutely not. She's just trying to make money out of it. That's the way it sounds to me. But let's just think about this situation. Was that rape? Was that rape? I would say no. I don't think it was rape. I don't think, because she consented to sex. It was fraud, maybe. This is like a business crime to me. This is not rape. That would be like having sex with a prostitute, paying in advance, having sex with a prostitute, then grabbing the money off her and running out of the house, running away with it. Right. Does that make it rape? No. It's theft. It's theft. So this case here, I would say, is fraud. Now, I've talked about this issue before, because if prostitution is an accepted thing, or particularly with a prostitute, then having sex with the person and not paying becomes more like a business crime, more like a form of theft or whatever, than the huge moral issue of rape. So it all becomes a bit complicated there. Because this is someone who was willing to have sex with the man for money. So his crime was not paying. So same as in a restaurant. If you're going to a restaurant, eat the meal, and then run out without paying, the crime was not eating the meal. The crime was not paying. Okay. Now, you could say if you knew in advance you weren't going to pay, then that would be different. But yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't see that as a rape case. I see it as a serious crime. But Now, an interesting philosophical discussion, but I wouldn't necessarily see that as a rape case. Right, Hamza Yousaf never out of the news. What this time? You know, the appalling £50 million inquiry into Sheku Bayo's death, when the violent drug addict had to be restrained by police after attacking a police officer. And there's been utter determination from the Scottish government and from the inquiry to find racism as the cause. Now, of course, who instigated this inquiry? No need to guess that. Hamza Yousaf, because he is obsessed with race identity politics. So it would have made his year if some report could have come back and said the police were racist. But they haven't come back. But the whole inquiry has fallen to bits. Anyway, but the new part of the story that's come out is when Hamza Yousaf instigated this inquiry, he knew that his mate, Amar Anwar, the lawyer, who seems to pop up in every wrong cause going, every legal case on the wrong side in Scotland. So Hamza Yousaf already knew that his mate would be representing the family in this public inquiry. In other words, would be landing a massive paycheck from the state. And Hamza Yousaf failed to declare his friendship with him. Now, in a later case with the same man, Hamza Yousaf did declare his friendship, but with this one, where it was a massive factor, Hamza Yousaf failed to declare his friendship with the lawyer who would be making possibly even millions of pounds. Who knows? Who knows? Out of this case. But just yet another from Hamza Yousaf, the gift that keeps on giving. He is just a disaster in everywhere he turns. It's quite unbelievable, the catalogue of errors that he makes. I mean, the sooner he's out of the parliament, the better. But having said that, I mean, he seems to be getting some sort of platform on the world stage for being a sort of Muslim victim monger. It doesn't actually stand up for Muslim values, but there seem to be a lot of people who want to parade him as an example of a prominent Muslim for some reason or other. I really don't know. Anyway, just that's the latest from Hamza Yousaf. Remember my lecture, Hamza Yousaf, the man, the myth, the Muslim. I mean, that was what, 2 years ago now? 18 months ago, 2 years ago? If I did it today, I mean, I could add a good half an hour to it, because there's always more material about Hamza Yousaf. Right, we'll do this very quickly. Share of babies born outside marriage. This just popped up on X the other day. So where's Britain down there? 48% of children born outside marriage. So roughly a half. That's a very sad statistic, because that means that the proportion of children who are going to be brought up in a stable family home is low, because where parents are not married, then the chance of mum and dad being together as the child is reared are far, far lower. So that's a very sad statistic. But look what's possible with a different culture. Japan, 2%. South Korea, 2%. Turkey, Israel, Greece, Cyprus, Croatia, I mean, even Switzerland, about half the rate as the UK. Poland, you know, these are more conservative countries. That's the way you would normally describe it. I mean, even Germany, would you think of Germany as a conservative country? Not really, probably, but far higher rates of children born within marriage. So that's a very concerning statistic from the UK, and the Scottish aspect of that, we would want to turn that around by promoting a culture of marriage, incentivizing it in the tax and benefit system, promoting it culturally, and teaching about it in school. Right, I'll just do this one quickly, then I'll bring in our guest. Now, the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, as you all know, their job is to decide which cases go to court, which criminal cases go to court in Scotland. So very important job, and very important that they are utterly uninfluenced by ideological considerations, obviously. And you'll remember back in June, or was it July, they had a stall at the Edinburgh Pride event. Now, when I say they had a stall, I mean a stall bedecked with transgender flags and rainbow, this, that, and the other, Progress Pride flags, you name it. So it wasn't just a sort of neutral presence. They were endorsing the cause of the event. They were endorsing LGBT activism. Now, for the Crown prosecution, the Crown Office and Procurator for Fiscal Service, to be showing that sort of bias in a controversial issue, a contemporary controversy, is obviously just totally wrong. So I wrote to them and complained. I also pointed out to them that there'd been a legal decision in England that had said that police forces must not align themselves with pride events. They must not display LGBT pride symbols and insignia. So I mentioned that in my letter. So here's the interesting part of their reply. It's obviously written by a lawyer. So the intention of it is to avoid saying anything, but to avoid any controversy and not give me any ammunition. So listen to this. While Crown Office Procurator Fiscal Service does not have any specific policy covering staff involvement in external events, well, that doesn't really make sense, because this is not about staff involvement. It's about you being involved as an organization. This wasn't like a couple of random employees decided to go along and have a table. This is your organization officially representing itself at Edinburgh Pride. I said their decisions are guided by the Civil Service Code, which sets out standards of integrity, honesty, objectivity, and impartiality that must be adhered to. This includes acting in a way that unjustifiably favour or discriminate against particular individual interests and reflects the civil service commitments to equality and inclusion. Consequently, attendance at all external events is considered on a case-by-case basis. Right, that doesn't say anything. That's just a non-answer, isn't it? Right, Edinburgh Pride. Subsequent to this event, on the 16th of July 2025, the High Court in England issued their ruling on Smith versus Chief Constable of Northumbria Police. That's the one I said about. When the court said, police, you've got to stop doing this. You can't be putting pride paraphernalia on your materials and officials. It says, in the light of this judgment and its interpretation of the public sector equality duty, the observations made in this judgment will form, I think they mean inform, will inform future case-by-case assessments when considering Crown Office and Procurator fiscal attendance at these events. Right, translation, as far as I can tell, basically, we thought it was okay to do it, but now this judgment's come out, I don't think we'll do it in the future. That's what it sounds like to me. I'll reply to them asking for clarification, but it seems like the court has clipped their wings a bit. But I think it's very frustrating that these things have to be decided in court. You can see from that letter, there's no inclination whatsoever to actually offer any intelligent engagement with the issue, to try and explain why having your table be decked in pride paraphernalia betrays a bias and would lead people to think that you're not impartial. They can't begin to engage with that. They can't begin to reply to that and explain why having like pride flags all over your associated with your organization doesn't betray partiality. They don't begin to reply to that. Just a bit of bland legal stuff, and basically I think they won't do it again. So if they won't do it again, then that's a step forward. But no sooner do I get that reply than they're at it again. This time they are supporting International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Right, problem. That indicates to me that the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service will be more keen to prosecute cases where there's violence against women rather than violence against men. Is that right? Is that the way they should be operating? No. They should be entirely impartial and treating each case on its merits. So again, they're betraying bias. Launches a global campaign, 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Right, gender-based. In other words, where it's a man committing a crime against a woman. So the Crown Office Procurator Fiscal Service are given the impression that they're especially concerned about gender-based violence. That's wrong. They should just be looking at every case on its merits. So here we've got the Lord Advocate saying, I'd like to make it clear that I understand sexual abuse inflicted upon women and children to be the greatest single challenge our justice system faces. Right, is that because of the volume of cases? I'm not sure. The blame for this lies with those responsible for the perpetration of such brutality. Okay, I hope you're not assuming the truth of allegations before they're proved. Okay, it says unacceptable and victims should feel able to speak out without further fear. Victims should be able to speak out. You don't know if someone's a victim or a fantasist until after the case. Okay, in the vast majority of cases, there will be victims, but this sounds to me as though they're assuming that the complainer is a victim. Should be able to speak out without further fear. Well, if you lie in court, you should be afraid. And there was a document attached to this as well that further expounded her viewpoint, and there were concerning aspects to that as well. What one of them said, there's no defense for if you commit for violence against women. There's no defense. There's no excuse, rather. Sorry, there's no excuse. And I thought, well, that's not true. In a court case, I mean, there can be excuses. The excuse might be, well, actually, she did consent. So what's the difference between an excuse and a defense? They're sort of the same thing, aren't they? So it's almost as if you're saying, if you're accused of one of these crimes, you've got no defense. We're not going to listen to any excuses. We're not going to listen to any mitigating circumstances or factors that might diminish your degree of guilt, because there are no excuses in these cases. Again, that's just wrong. So we've got the Lord Advocate, who's just totally in the pocket of the SNP and has adopted, or probably already held, that's why she got the job, the philosophy of the SNP. And it comes through, and it is skewing the legal system. So I feel another letter coming on to them. It took me months to get a reply to that one. They reckon they hadn't got it, reckon it gone to the spam folder, reckon someone was on. Oh, this went on and on and on. But I'll be back onto them. Do share this if you would. That would be great. All right, greetings to others, saying hello there. But it is time to meet Matt. Matt, welcome back.
Hey,
Matt,
good to be back.
Show a few months ago now. We couldn't quite remember what it was then. But Matt responded to when I was talking the other week about workplace bullying, and we thought we'd have a little chat around this concept and bullying in general, and what it means, and maybe how the meaning of bullying has changed. So Matt, let's start with workplace bullying. What's your take with what's going on with this?
Well, I think it's one of these things where the language has become very problematic because, for a couple of reasons. I think the first reason is it can easily be weaponized, because you can sort of accuse somebody of bullying behavior or bullying, and it's very hard to disprove because it's something that is felt by the victim. But I think it's also just a problem with actual communication and with clarity, because there isn't really sufficient language to describe what I would describe as real bullying, which is a bit of a controversial thing to say. But I think often what a lot of people are describing as bullying is not bullying. It's still unacceptable and it's horrible, but it's not bullying. And we don't have the sufficient language to describe these things accurately, because I think most people, when you say bullying, they think of schoolyard name calling and things like that. But it's such a spectrum. It could, bullying could be something which is really quite minor, just making somebody feel a bit uncomfortable, or it could be something that literally destroys somebody's life, and it's done very, very deliberately. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a bit of a problem of understanding each other when we're trying to talk about this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those words like abuse. It's a light the blue touch paper word. You've really got to hit the panic button if someone uses the word bullying. Like, who needs suspending? We've got to take this seriously. You can't ignore bullying allegations. But when we look at what people actually mean by it, like you say, it could be what some people would just describe as an assertive boss or a demanding boss with high standards, or keeping people on their toes or whatever. I think one way of looking at this, I was reading someone talking about this a while ago, is it's partly a reflection of a sort of feminizing drift in society. That maybe the way, an office full of blokes might normally, or a workforce full of blokes might normally talk to each other, compared to if you have a workforce full of women, the way they would normally talk to each other, it'd probably be quite a different sort of dynamic. But obviously now, men and women are mixed up in the workplace. But I think the general assumption seems to be the way the women would tend towards dealing with each other and speaking to each other tends to be seen as the ideal. And the ways that the men are different from that tends to be seen as problematic. And like banter is the classic example. Like banter is more often than not used to refer to imply some sort of toxic, unpleasant behavior from men, that men are probably seen as just a bit of fun. So do you think people deliberately, do they realize that this is the word that really gets you, say it hits the panic button, and it's a way to bring someone to heel, to really get your own back at someone? It's just to throw this word in.
I think sometimes, yeah, but I mean, sometimes the reverse can be true, because people, don't take it seriously. It's like, oh yeah, bullying, again, because it has that connotation of something which is trivial. So that's why it's such a sort of bizarre situation that we're in, because I think it can simultaneously be hugely overestimated and hugely underestimated. And it just depends on the context.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say with workplace bullying, I think, as I say, the culture in a lot of workplaces is shifted that direction, which is what a human resources department as well. I think their whole training and culture tends to lead them to the point of being on the side of the very sensitive person, let's put it that way, rather than the boss who's been a bit assertive and demanding. But just looking at the concept in other areas, concept of bullying in other areas, because I would say in the workplace, the culture tended to be hypersensitive to things that could be regarded as bullying, whereas in schools, the situation seems to be the opposite.
Would you agree with that? I'm just seeing the comments. Somebody is being very unkind to me and really hurting my feelings about my my terribly messy room.
Yeah, well, I might need to suspend you for that, Kirsty. If it happens again, if this is a formal warning, if you make another unkind comment, then we might need to suspend you.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, Kirsty. You're not wrong. Sorry.
Yes, so schools.
Yes, school. Oh gosh, where to start? Well, I'm quite embroiled in this one because it's part of my professional output as a filmmaker. I'm a musician and a filmmaker, and I did a short film on the topic of bullying. It wasn't the approach to it was very much like trying to encourage children to think. So it wasn't your standard, here's the bully, here's the victim situation. It was a much more kind of imaginative approach. But I won't kind of go into details about it. But so I had to sort of think about this topic very deeply. And that's when I realized it was really such a minefield, really. And the reactions that you would get were so completely different. I would agree with you, I think, particularly when it comes to schools, about the feminine approach. And I am not for a moment suggesting that, there's a right way and a wrong way, and that a masculine, the masculine approach is clear. It's Tom Brown School Days. It's like just, beat the heck out of them. And I don't think that's great either. I don't think many people think that's ideal. But we're in a phase now where we are definitely seeing what might be considered the feminine approach, because, well, let's be honest, most primary school teachers are female. They're female-dominated environments.
90%. 90%. 90%.
90%.
Yeah.
Wow. And that for primary schools, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's at 70% for teachers on the whole. Actually, yeah. I think but 90%. So it's quite possible, like if you've got a child growing up, for example, without a father, that they might have no male influence for the first 10, 12 years of their life, which is quite the thought. But what I've observed is, in some ways, it's obviously a kind of gentler approach. But another thing which I think is interesting, I'll give one example of a situation I was in where I was at a residential, and some boys had jumped another boy. These were boys from quite a rough area. They knew what they were doing. This poor boy that they jumped on, had never experienced anything like that before. He was pretty traumatized. And the approach was to sit them down and say, I think we both made some mistakes here, didn't we, boys? I think we both, did some things we weren't proud of. I think, and the hesitancy to say, no, there was a victim and there was a bully. So that's what's very interesting to me. It's like it's both. There's the let's be gentle, let's not judge anybody, but actually also sometimes well, the people who are genuinely hurting other people, we're also not going to take that. We're not going to take that seriously. So it is inadvertently harming people. And I think that's what I find. I'm all for a gentle approach. I think in many situations, I think there's a justifiable backlash from maybe a sort of a society where there was just feelings were repressed and all sorts of things. But we are seeing some, I suppose, very unintended consequences from that backlash, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I agree. It's a balance issue. Virtually everyone would agree that it's a balance issue, and there's a place for different approaches. But at the moment, it's just going further and further and further, way off in one direction. And the victims of it are generally the pupils who are on the receiving end of some pretty appalling treatment. Because in many cases, the schools are not capable of getting a grip on it and actually stopping the bullies from doing what they're doing. Because as far as the bullies are concerned, these chats and whatever, they're just a joke. And as far as the other kids are concerned, they're a joke as well. They describe it as nothing happened. I did it and nothing happened, because they class sitting and talking about it and whatever as nothing happened. So yeah, they are the victims. And meanwhile, their behavior towards staff as well. The staff are bullied by pupils. So while the staff are tiptoeing around, kid gloves with the kids, terrified that if they put a foot wrong, they're going to, who knows what's going to happen. Their career could be over. Meanwhile, the kids' behavior towards the staff is in many cases violent, literally violent, quite routinely.
Yeah.
So it really is going towards the extreme there. So the bullying among kids, I think, is not properly dealt with because they won't get a grip on it. Some kids are just bad, or they're naughty. They need to learn the lesson, and very often they will learn their lesson if they're made to regret what they've done. But then the behavior to the teachers is equally terrible. So you've got this like hypersensitivity to bullying within the workplace. Then in schools, they love to talk about bullying. I mean, there's a massive amount of emphasis, talk about it, policies written about it. But when it actually comes to dealing with it, they haven't really got the tools to do it. As saying, the bullying of teachers is terrible as well. The other area, I think, where you do hear the term bullying used, and that's on social media. Because on social media, there's a massive amount of behavior that you could probably describe as bullying. People making the most obscene and offensive, slanderous comments about people with the sole purpose of hurting them and doing this on a repeated basis. I think probably by any definition, that would be bullying. But yeah, I don't know what can be done about that. I think with social media, it just reveals what people are like when they feel that there are no restraints, and it's quite concerning to see how that goes, to see how people do behave when they think they can just get away with letting fly. It's a big concern.
Yeah.
But I think in the workplace, I've heard people say this, we're heading towards the point where it's very difficult to manage a group of people, because the employees are often starting from the assumption that basically no one's got the right to tell them what to do, and their happiness should be paramount in all considerations. So managing groups of employees becoming more and more difficult, because I say like straightforward methods are not working. And if you actually threaten someone, say, look, you're not doing your job, we're not going to be able to keep you if you don't do your job, then immediately that's bullying. I'm being threatened. I'm really upset by that. So it's a very, very, very difficult.
Well, I think that's exactly where. So this is why it's a sort of circular thing. And the more you think about it, you're like, I don't even know how to really process all this. But I think where I've landed on it is we're really bad at recognizing bullying behavior as opposed to bullying, because sometimes in these situations you're describing, actually the bully can be the person who's claiming that they're being bullied, because they've found a way of weaponizing victimhood or whatever it happens to be. And I think obviously we live in a kind of culture that's very shot through with all these kind of Marxist ideas and stuff about victims and oppressors and stuff. So it doesn't make sense to a lot of people that somebody in a position of power can also be a victim. And I think that's part of what complicates it. I mean, that's so same issue with the schools. As you say, teachers can be victims of bullying, but that just doesn't make sense to somebody who has that mindset where, well, no, if you've got the power, you can't possibly also be a victim. So I think we just need to get a lot better at recognizing that is coercive, manipulative, bullying behavior, and we're not going to be dismissive just because it doesn't look like what we expect it to look like.
Yeah, but in my experience, kids can be pretty appalling to each other. I mean, to be honest, that's a routine. If you've got a class of 30 kids and they're given free rein, then there will be some pretty unpleasant behavior going on. Not involving all of them, but not even a majority, but it is very much routine.
Well, that's another thing that came out in my research, because I think what people don't take seriously enough is just human nature. And that if you've ever been on the receiving end of bullying, or if you've ever been a bully, there's something really kind of instinctual going on, because there's a huge, I made a video about it and I described it, it's an addiction, really. You can be addicted to that feeling of having complete power over another human being. It's like, how people get into really dark stuff and obviously whatever, it's a sort of something that the human body reacts to. And you're dealing with that. And I don't see any of that sort of discussion again in the sort of policies. They assume that everybody will just want to be nice to each other. Some people really don't. There's darkness in it inside everybody, which if you don't sort of, shut it down with really clear messaging, and you allow that to grow, well, it can lead anywhere.
It's going to be part of the deal. If you're going to put large numbers of kids together for a substantial portion of the day, part of the deal has got to be that you're keeping a bit of an eye on what's going on, and you're willing to deal with issues that come up, deal with them decisively. Basically, you've got to protect kids from each other. Yeah, simple as that. Because if you don't, it will be.
What would you? This is where it gets difficult. So what? So obviously, I think we both agree the current system is not working great. What sort of sanctions do you think we should have if somebody is clearly a bully and is using their power to harm other people repeatedly? What needs to be done about that?
But for the bully, I think there's some bullies who will just learn the lesson the good old-fashioned way through punishment. So you tell them off and talk to them as well. What sort of, when I was teaching as a housemaster, I'd say to boys, like, what sort of person do you want to be? Do you want to be a person who just makes other people miserable and causes a huge amount of people to dislike you? Is that the person you want to be? Is that the way you want to gain satisfaction through life? And I would have the tools at my disposal to make their life pretty unpleasant in various ways, with punishments and whatever. So in the vast majority of cases, you could deal with that. But with ones I couldn't deal with, I would have the boys for 1 year. For ones I couldn't deal with, more often than not, as they grew up, they learn somewhere else. Someone else will get through to them as they grow up, as they mature through the school. So the vast majority would get there in the end. And some of the ones who don't, basically they'd end up being expelled. And I think, in a sense, that's a failure, but you've got to preserve your school community. What happens to them? Well, who knows? Maybe they learn the lesson even later in life. And then some of them, they think, will probably end up in prison because just their nature is so distorted.
Well, that's another thing I think informs my views on this, because I do quite a lot of work in prisons through music, do kind of music with prisoners and stuff. And it's kind of heartbreaking because I speak to a lot of the guys, young guys, 19, 20 or whatever. And, paraphrasing a bit, but they sort of say, nobody ever told me that I was doing anything wrong, and it starts with petty theft, and then you get into drugs, and you do some alcohol, and they get into some fights and stuff, and then you've killed somebody, and one minute you were just sticking up for your mate, and next minute you're standing in court with a murder conviction, and it's like nobody ever told me that it was leading to this, and it sounds like a story, it sounds like a made up story, but it's really not.
That was one of my frustrations. When I was a housemaster, I said I could put boys in Saturday night detention for a couple of hours. They could be suspended, or all sorts of things. We're doing all sorts of extra jobs, etc. I could give them a pretty hard time as well, pretty stern talking to. But even with that, I thought with some boys, I could see they're going to get thrown out of the school, and I wished I could do more dramatic things to try and stop them from, because that's a major life disaster. being expelled from the school. That's a pretty significant life event. And I just thought I would like to be able to do. I would like to be able to, have some sort of, I don't know, solitary confinement, send them to work camp or something that was really, really unpleasant. Because I felt that could have meant that they wouldn't have needed to go on to the next stage. So even in that situation, which is a few years ago now, which by modern school standards has probably had far more tools than any teacher has now. But even then, I wished I had more, because I thought it would have given a chance to stop things progressing to worse problems in the future. And I think the same applies with the law as well, in that petty crimes are, well, so-called petty crimes, lower level crimes, are dealt with so leniently as well, that just the train gathers momentum, and it doesn't get there, right? It goes through your comments there. Have a cupboard like
a few options there, yeah. We should point out, teachers can be bullies as well, as Matilda teaches us, and that's
yes.
I'm not in favour of that either. I've seen a lot of that too, and it can be extremely unpleasant.
Yeah, I think in the days of corporal punishment, I heard a lot of stories of teachers who got sort of carried away with that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Yeah, bullied at work 15 years ago. Anyone who left the job to look back and realize what was happening. Yeah, these things, it can all be very real, but it's trying to maintain a sensible balance with it. Kids can be worse than adults. Absolutely. Kids, or some kids, will get up to their.
But isn't it
really
interesting?
Heartlessly cruel.
Yeah, but it's interesting that sort of is a revelation to people, isn't it? Because it's common sense. Kids, they're not fully developed. They need to be socialized. They need to be taught right from wrong. They need to be, gradually brought up in the way to be. And it's very cruel and unfair to expect that they should pop out of the womb and immediately have fully formed morals. It's a faulty philosophy. But the schools and stuff have bought right into that. And I think that's what causes an awful lot of the issues. We should expect children to misbehave, and we should expect to be the ones that are trying to guide them in the right way.
Yeah. But the humanist, humanist philosophy is that the children are born pristine and good, and society corrupts them. That's tends to be a sort of left-wing view as well. Everything's the fault of society, not the individual. So these perfectly good kids, even if they are naughty, that's just because society's failed them in some way.
Yeah.
So it's not their fault. So we've just got to try and improve the way we treat them. And it's just wrong. If it's not a moral approach, it doesn't reflect. Right? It doesn't reflect
until you become, if you're a male, until you become an adult, and then you're immediately, the root of all evil, which is extremely disorientating for boys in particular. Maybe before the age of 16, you're this highly protected characteristic. And then suddenly, particularly if you're a white male, you are now the reason for all of the world's problems. There's quite the adjustment. Yeah,
and I think what's in it? It's got my train of thought. No, let's put this on the cover. That's maybe a bit much, but
no, thank you.
Interesting suggestions coming up. Yeah, I think while generally they think kids can't do anything wrong, it's not their fault until they say something sexist or racist or homophobic, and then all hell breaks loose, and that's just absolutely appalling. How can we can't allow this in the school? We're going to come down like a ton of bricks on it. But then if they go out and punch someone for some other reason, well, how can we better support you? That is certainly true. Family instability, fatherlessness in particular, is a massive influence. I'll tell you what else I think is an influence as well, is what people refer to as generation daycare, and that we're in the process of an experiment that's never really been conducted before in human history on this sort of scale, and that's to take very young children away from their parents, their mother in particular, at a very early age for huge periods of time, and there's significant evidence to show that this leads to problems, emotional regulation problems in the longer term. So that's I think is a very significant factor as well. Right, that was a very interesting chat on that topic, but we've got a couple of minutes left, so let's Matt, let's press on, shall we? Let's see what else we've got. Let's leave that one. Right. This was a letter I had in there. I've written a few letters to newspapers this last week, getting back into my old habits again. As soon as I start looking at newspapers, I see things and think, oh, dear, I need to respond to that. This was someone who wrote in the Herald, basically with the line that Jesus was concerned with the poor and oppressed, so Jesus was a left-wing activist, so we should too. And the reason Jesus was killed was because he stood up for the poor and oppressed, and the powerful people didn't like it. So that sort of message, which you'll hear in sort of liberal churches across the world. So I replied saying, yeah, Jesus was certainly concerned about the suffering of those who experience inequalities and injustices. But I said that the writer errs when he claims that Jesus was executed for challenging social inequalities. Jesus was killed for claiming to be God. While much of Jesus' teaching has political relevance, his central mission was to present and enact the divine scheme of redemption through which all can enter into God's family. Then I said, by all means, bring Christian teaching into politics, but by no means reduce Christianity to a political creed. And I think that's a warning to the left and the right. I mean, a lot of liberal churches trying to make left-wing Christianity, left-wing politics and Christianity one of the same. In America, to some degree, there are people who try and weld together Christianity and right-wing politics, but it needs to be, in my view, it needs to be a one-way street. Christian teaching goes into politics. Politics doesn't go into Christian teaching or Christian identity. And the reason I wanted to talk about that, I think, I guess I would want a lot of Christians to hear me saying that, because I think a lot of Christians think there's a danger in trying to make Christianity political. There's a danger. And if people hear that there's a danger, if people hear that in Scotland, they go, okay, that's a danger. So I wonder who could be falling into that trap in Scotland. Let me think. It must be those family party people. They're the ones who do that sort of thing. It must be them who are falling into that trap. But not so. Any thoughts about that, Matt? I don't know anything about your religious beliefs as far as I'm aware, but any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I think you mentioned already, but I think people need to be aware that there is a Christian nationalism already in this country, and it's very very left-wing progressive Christian nationalism. Because you walk into your average church that you walk into will have all the creeds of left-wing progressive politics in it. And if it's a choice between, well, what does the Bible say and what does left-wing progressive politics say, the left-wing progressive politics is going to be the one that will win out. And it's just about what we're proud of and what we're embarrassed about. So we're very proud of things that align with that left-wing progressive politics, and we're very embarrassed about the things that don't align with it, even if we believe them. So it's interesting that Christian nationalism is sort of used as a slur nowadays, but it's been in this country for ages. We have national churches that have been sort of towing that line for a long time.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So I would say probably a good proportion of churches and denominations, if they're talking about a left-wing cause, even if it is justifiably, you can look at it from a Christian angle. So if it's like gender equality or anti-racism or care for the environment, etc., or poverty, then the churches are very much on the front foot and they want to talk about them. It's as though they think that the pitch that's going to attract people is a left-wing progressive pitch. Then when it comes to things they believe about, like pro-life, for example, or LGBT, then okay, they might believe traditional Christian teaching about those, but the assumption is that these are things that put people off. These are controversial, sensitive, divisive issues, which really rather not talk about them. When it comes to ones that align with the left wing, then we'll have a special Sunday for every one of them. And I think that's a very widespread issue. Certainly in the sort of church circles that I am involved in, I think that's quite significant. Right, that's our vigil in Edinburgh on Friday night. The weather was appalling. It was forecast to be belting down with rain. It actually stopped a bit while we were doing it. So we were the hardy few at that, but the response was really good. I found with pro-life things this year in particular, I mean, this is a tiny sample. I'm not suggesting this is some huge trend, but what I've noticed is more people who are either coming up being supportive or extremely open-minded and just ready to be persuaded. And after 10 minutes of conversation, you really think, this person's actually changed their mind. I really think they've come over to our way of seeing things. So that was good. Right, that is 10 o'clock. Let's see what will be coming up next. Oh, let's just finish on this one. Had you seen this one, Matt?
No.
The World Cup, in which Scotland will be playing, of course. It's very exciting. On the 26th of June, a historic Pride match will take place at the World Cup in Seattle to celebrate LGBTQ Pride Month. So the organizers or the city governors of Seattle, somehow or other, are declaring that one of the World Cup matches is LGBTQ Pride match. And this match is going to be between Egypt and Iran. Right. How is this going to go? Surely Egypt, certainly Iran, if not Egypt, certainly Iran, surely they're going to refuse to take part in it. And when they refuse to take part, surely the teams have got the stronger hand. Surely the organizers will have to back down. When the teams say, look, we're here to play football, you can't be putting some other message here and expecting us to be implying endorsement of another message just because you've decided this is the match to do it. So I really think Pride match is not going to go ahead under the Pride match banner because Egypt and especially Iran are not going to allow it. But we shall see. That's going to be a little subplot of the World Cup. So alongside Scotland's glorious campaign to victory, we'll also find it interesting following what's going to go on with the Pride match between Egypt and Iran. How will that work out, Matt? What do you think?
I suspect Egypt and Iran would take a dim view of it, but maybe they'll find some way to get around it, and they'll deceive them. You know, they'll say, "Oh no, we're not. It's not that kind of pride. It's just national pride." Or I don't know.
No, I don't think that's going to wash.
No.
Do you agree though? If the teams say, "Right, we don't want this," then surely the teams have got the stronger position.
Oh yeah.
And the organisers will have to back down.
I think so. I think they're just having a go. I think they're having a go because they think, oh, if we could get away with this, it would be such a brilliant thing. We're uniting everybody. It'll make us look so good, and everybody's holding hands, singing "Kumbaya." You know, so they're just like, oh, we'll give it a shot, see what happens.
Yeah. My son's quite into football, and he follows a lot of like unofficial media, and you see what some of the supporters chant and sing about for various football teams around the world. A lot of it is absolutely appalling, really terrible in Britain and abroad.
Yeah.
And I think on the TV, they managed to present this, you know, sport and football is a great thing that enhances harmony and cooperation, brings everyone together in love and unity. But how anyone believes that living in Scotland, I don't know. But worldwide, they promote this.
Tribalism at its best, or its worst, depending on your perspective.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Right, Matt, great to have you on the show again. Thanks for your input. It's been great talking to you. And come back again sometime next year.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Right, good night, everyone. Don't forget to tune in next week for the Christmas special, fun and games galore. See you next week. Good night.